Okay.
Excellent.
So we're back again, back for the next section of Colony in Space, episode
Yep.
5.
That's the one.
Because obviously we had to break this one up because it's a 6-parter and we just don't have time to do it all at once.
Nope.
And I'm actually kind of happy because it lets us rest.
Yeah, let's just rest before we get into the moment of truth.
Exactly.
Yes.
So last time we were left off with the Master pointing a gun
At the doctor.
yeah. And what did he say?
He said, well, a stray bullet could hit you amongst all this firefight.
Mm.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
Basically, he's threatening to shoot
I
the
hope
doctor.
I haven't forgotten everything.
Well, no, it'll all come back to us, I'm sure, because there's the mining colony, there's the colonists, there's the weird ballsack people.
That's right.
And
There's the mute.
Yeah, the mute leaders of
Yeah.
that, and then the weird baby leader of that. But yeah, it's just a lot of like...
And the claw machines.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of economic talk and
Yeah.
whatnot, but I found it really interesting.
I'm sure we'll be alright. So let's
Let's
get
do
into
it.
Episode
Let's do it.
5.
See, it looks like Vader's helmet, the shape of
Oh
Vader's
yeah,
helmet.
it does it?
There's something about... I don't know what it is about the image, but there's something about Pertwee's eyes that always looks slightly off to me in that image.
Well, I've always thought that it's a puppet's head.
Could be.
It's looked like a puppet's head to me.
Yeah, it doesn't... Like, his eyes...
Like, it doesn't look like him. It looks
No.
like a puppet of him.
Yeah.
Victims of stray bullets. Winton! Got to stop this. You agree?
Has the Master assumed someone else's position?
I think that's what it is. I think he's impersonating someone. He killed or kidnapped or did something to the actual adjudicator and then has some ulterior motive, which I don't think we've learnt yet.
Dear Doctor, how can you possibly know
I
that?
tell you that he is not the adjudicator. He wants to go to the primitive.
Can you substantiate these accusations?
Why don't you check his credentials with Earth?
Talking of credentials. Might we see yours? Well, now, gentlemen, I think we could continue our discussion uninterrupted.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, Doctor. TARDIS can change its shape, you know. He changed his with this. Don't you remember? When the Master first came to Earth, I got a hold of the key to his TARDIS.
That's a nice bit of, like, continuity.
Terror of the Autons.
Yeah. That's a nice bit of continuity.
Yeah. See, this is how you do a season arc. Not tell us that there's a hybrid, and not reveal it.
Yes.
So this is the Master's TARDIS.
I love that screwdriver.
I like how the Master's TARDIS is right to left,
Somewhere.
so you know it's a
Yeah.
bit different.
Yeah.
Very slowly, one pace.
Why not step over it?
Yeah, why not you just jump over it? Jeez, just lucky a bum didn't get in there. I would have gone further in before standing up. Wow, that is very Star Wars.
I like that.
Before Star Wars, though.
Yeah.
Hey, this is 1971. Yeah,
6 years before Star Wars.
6 years before Star Wars.
Reminds me of the cockpit from the Satan pit.
Yes. Go to hell.
Toby, don't look. Don't look.
I love that.
Yeah.
That in the future the printout is on a typewriter. That's brilliant.
To go into landing orbit.
I feel like
Landing orbit.
Yeah.
I feel like there'd be a good video in Dudley Simpson versus Murray Gold. You know? Because Dudley Simpson did most of the soundtrack from like season 2 to season 17,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good themes in there.
Like that little
The Master's theme, yeah.
yeah. And then obviously there's the banana with Johnson. The Murray Gold.
Oh yeah.
There you can
Or the
Oh, Joe!
bugger. course.
Oh no. Gas
Of
coming in through
course,
the
there's
vent.
gas.
Hurry up, the master might.
Gas is a terrible plot device. Gas coming in through vents is a terrible plot device. And I hate it. For personal reasons.
Why?
Because of my end of year film.
Huh?
Because of my end of year film.
Oh yeah, that's right.
My end of year film was terrible.
But funnily enough, in The Sound of Drums, what does the master use in the room with the
Yes.
politics?
Good point. Good point.
The gas.
You're insane!
I feel like this is one of those stories that are going to get an updated CGI when they do the Blu-ray release.
Yeah, I reckon so.
Because
Just,
they did it with Revenge of the
Okay.
Cybermen. That it was these kinds of shots that they
Yeah, just-
changed.
just improving the chroma keying and
Yeah.
everything.
Well, just they shoot new shots for all the.
They did that with the original Star Trek series as well. There's shots of the CGI Enterprise when you watch it on Netflix.
That's why we landed here.
He is blonde Bruce Bolton though.
He's got a very similar look for sure. Yeah.
He looks like a mix of Bruce Bolton and He-Man.
I don't know whose outfit I like more
Well, Doctor. Still pursuing burglary, eh?
because they both pull off
You know,
what
when
they're
you stole
wearing
my
so
kids'
well.
observation circuit, I decided to build
I guess it depends. Because Pertwee's is kind of more. It's I don't know. I don't want to say silly, but it's more.
It's got a bit more of a flair to it.
Yeah. But it's less realistic, whereas the Masters kind of feels more sophisticated.
Yes, imposing and
Yeah.
sophisticated.
You know, you really are most unimaginative.
true methods are the best.
This is the script just saying we've done this before.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like their fourth story together, and it's like,
At least they're being honest.
yeah,
See, I'm really liking this episode because it's not focusing on the primitive
mm,
side, which was the weakest
yeah.
element.
I've already got a bit of a controversial opinion already.
What?
So it's been about 5 or 6 years since I've seen The Demons,
Mm.
but I actually think I prefer this.
Yeah.
The Demons is often regarded as one of the best Pertwee stories, and I didn't really care for it.
Yeah.
I actually quite like this.
Yeah, this is like, I can see why, as like, for if you're watching this with a family, your kids would like zone out.
Yeah.
But as an adult,
Yeah.
I'm really liking it.
I just remember The Demons was trying too hard to be gothic horror,
Mm.
and it doesn't work with the Barry Letts style.
Yeah,
you
like,
know?
I appreciate the sort of gothic horror aesthetic, but I kind of agree. Again, it's been years for me.
The
as well
Demons
since I've
is
seen
the
it.
one for me where it doesn't work,
Mm.
because it just doesn't feel like gothic horror.
No.
It's out of style for that
Mm.
era, you know?
Because I guess because it was the 70s, they'll try to evoke the Hammer
Yeah.
horror.
Yeah.
And stuff, and Hammer horror and all their competitors and whatnot.
Yeah.
but I'm starting to agree with that comment that says this didn't deserve to be on the list.
Mm-hmm. I would love if the Season 8 Blu-ray had, like... Because you know how it usually has, like, the designs they've been doing has, like, the Doctor on the front, and there's, like a cloud of the villains from the season.
Yeah.
I would love if it was, like, you had the villains, like, the Autons,
Yeah.
the Axons, the
Yeah.
things from this one,
Yeah.
the demons from the Demons,
Yeah.
but then you flip it on the back as the Master.
Oh, that'd be
And then
great.
the Master, and in the little cloud you have, like, his enemies, so, like, Brigadier Joe.
Oh, that's...
That would just be...
Email the BBC and tell them that. 'cause
That
that's
would
a
be...
brilliant design.
I would love that.
Not gonna lie, I thought you were gonna say have the Master from all the different stories that he appeared in, just a whole bunch of
No,
Roger
no, no,
Delgato's
no.
face.
Just have one Master in the
Yeah.
middle,
Yeah.
and have his enemies.
Yeah, that'd be
Like, that would just be great.
gorgeous.
So is this inside the Master's TARDIS?
Mm-hmm.
He's just got capsules inside.
I quite like that. He's got prison, like he's got.
Yeah,
So when he inevitably kidnaps people.
yeah. Like his TARDIS is a booby
Yeah.
trap.
Yeah.
The only mistake we made was not killing you when we had the chance.
Unable by this hostile attitude, nor by repeating slanderous allegations which
He is very Roose Bolton, like you're
Mm.
right.
Just doesn't break a sweat.
No. Commands authority by never yelling.
You may be my son, but you're a bastard.
Oh,
Tusken Raider. This is before Star Wars.
Yeah.
George Lucas just ripped off this episode. He literally ripped off this episode.
George Lucas has said before he's a Whovian, hasn't he? I'm pretty sure there's...
He must be.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you stay there. I'll go and ship that irrigation pipe.
I have a theory that this episode's going to end with something happening, zooming in on the Doctor's face, and then the cliffhanger.
Oh,
Oh, damn.
Not that old.
Hasn't broken, isn't it?
In that case, we'd better walk.
Why not?
I just the dynamic is so funny. How they just like the enemies, but they all just walk
Yeah,
together.
they're so chummy.
Yeah.
Like, just John Pertwee tapping him on the shoulder.
He's like,
It's... Also, this again, I think I mentioned this in the first episode, it's reminding me of Utopia. Because they're going on a spaceship just to be doomed.
yeah.
And the Master is involved.
I just love this idea that like the Master's not out to kill the Doctor. They just both want different things, and they end up clashing.
Yeah. It's a great dynamic.
It's a very sassy relationship, you know.
Because the thing is, according to them both, the Master is actually the smarter of the two.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, he definitely is. It's just that
It's
the
just a-
Doctor's got better morals.
Yeah.
It's like a, you know, comparing to Harry Potter, it's like a Gryffindor versus Slytherin.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's Sherlock
Master's
Holmes.
the definition of a Slytherin.
Yeah, it's Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty.
Oh,
It's without question that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest. But it's so
And
much,
it's like Harry and Draco.
Mhm.
Draco's not evil.
No.
He's just very, very
Oh
slimy.
no, it's closer to Harry and Lucius.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
In terms of this iteration of the Master is more like Lucius.
True. Yeah, he's like Lucius. Yeah.
But I do get what you mean.
Yeah. Harry and the Malfoys.
Yeah. That works.
Try this.
Look, let go.
Oh no!
Oh no, they're about to get gassed.
Someone's trying to rescue Miss Grant. No, you can't. I warned you, Doctor. No!
Brilliant.
Oh, what a brilliant cliffhanger!
Wow. Wow. So, episode 5.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I actually really liked
This was
it.
fun.
Yeah.
Like, it was fun, the whole Doctor and Master
Yeah,
thing.
my fears of this story, because it's such an economical and political one, getting boring. But no, because they did the right thing. They paired the Doctor and the Master together, and whenever they're on screen together, their chemistry is just spectacular. So
Yeah.
they're super entertaining, and then also the political side of it was super interesting. That the mining corporation took charge and acted as if they were going by Earth's instructions when they weren't. They were going by their own because of their own arrogance, and then the colonists are doomed on this. Like they've been sent to this doomed flight. So it's just, I mean, everything's interesting.
Functionally, this was more of a transition episode, but I liked it. It was entertaining.
Absolutely, it was really
Yeah.
entertaining and well paced, and
Yeah.
like it just flew by. I found.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the last.
It
episode.
just shows the chemistry between John Pertwee and Roger Delgado.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, the sass that they have.
The best Master and Doctor team
yeah.
by far.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. So I guess we've got one more part.
Let's do
Episode
it.
6, gonna finish
Yeah.
the story.
The first 5 episodes were all of a consistent quality, which is saying a lot.
I mean, I feel like it's got to the point in this story where even if this episode's terrible, it's still like because the first 5 parts are good.
yeah.
It's not going to really let it down, I don't think.
It's not like a class act in how to write Doctor Who, but it's
No.
fun. It's fine. It's interesting. It's an interesting story with interesting characters.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's agreed that John Pertwee's the most violent Doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They tried to replicate it with Capaldi, but
When?
well, in World Enough in Time, he does the Venusian Aikido,
Does he?
and he flips the guy over, and then it
I
goes.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
There's so many things about World Enough in Time that I would have forgotten that, you know.
City.
Here we go, back to this storyline again.
The worst storyline. So hopefully they do something interesting with it.
I mean, the Master's there, so it should be fine.
Yeah.
No, wait!
How do I reason with them? Can't trick a mute. Oh, that's right, the glass board.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah.
You've given me enough trouble. Now get on that ship when you're told.
Jeez.
Get under there. Move quick before I change my mind.
Oh. Is he helping her?
Yeah, yeah.
You deduced all that from these pictures?
Well, not exactly. I knew it already. I was the Time Lord.
Fucking hell.
I love that.
You underrate me.
What about me?
Try holding your breath. Off.
Then you can sit in your ship till you rot, try to get out, and you'll be shot on the spot.
That rhymed.
Reminds me of Greatest Show in the Galaxy. When the guy's rhyming. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Bit of an underrated story, that one.
I love Greatest Show in the Galaxy.
Yeah.
It's so watchable.
And it's very meta as well.
Yeah. Whoa.
Oh no,
Oh,
no.
Ah,
Gross.
sludge.
Oh no. I love the sort of gritty and grimy aesthetic of this serial.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that's kind of
Or wasn't it
indicative-
like her shirt
Yeah.
got covered in sand,
Yeah,
and then we're like, no.
yeah.
It's just funny because there's no music,
No, yeah.
so it's just it looks like just two men having a fuck.
Which actually kind of helps with the effect, I reckon, because it's kind
Yeah.
of more
Yeah.
oh my god, he's trying to drown him.
Like, it looks like something you would just see
Yeah.
in town
Which I think
on a Friday night.
actually helps. Yeah,
Yeah.
helps the tone.
Whoa. Okay.
Very blue.
It's really weird eyeline.
Excellent.
Excellent. This is excellent, Doctor.
Here's the colonist spaceship. We've made it.
Is it going to explode?
How did you know that?
That's so
Utopia.
dark.
Utopia.
Yeah. That's so grim.
I told them the motors were all right.
Fucking hell.
That is such a grim subplot. The colonists, the protagonists of the story, basically just gone.
I do know a little basic astronomy.
Then you will know that one day
Taken in. There must be some way of opening it.
Knock.
Like midnight.
Oh, Artu, there's no one here.
solo.
I like it. That was a Macho Man axe handle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Rest in peace.
Why don't you come in with me?
Come with me.
We're both Time Lords. We're both renegades. We could be masters of the galaxy.
And the masters of the universe. E-Man.
School reunion. I reckon fucking what's his name from School Reunion?
Finch.
Anthony Head.
Yeah.
He could have played a good master.
Oh, absolutely. As I
Yeah.
said, I wish he wasn't just in that one episode because he's so good. Imagine instead of John Sim, we had Anthony Head.
It would have been different.
Yeah,
I can't imagine not having John Sim though.
true.
No. I will not join you in your absurd dreams of a galactic conquest. Why?
Yeah. Well, this is before Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
9 years before.
Lords who exiled you on one insignificant planet.
You'll never understand, will you? I want to see the universe, not rule it.
Then I'm
that
very
line.
sorry.
Ultimate development of life on this planet.
Is it?
Why have you returned? What do you want here?
Your planet?
Once the weapon was built, our race began to decay. The radiation from the weapon's blasts poisoned the soil of our planet.
It's like one of those toys at the warehouse. You push the button and it starts talking.
Mm-hmm.
You are not fit to be a god. I said
Such a shame. Because the script is really
If
good.
they'd actually gotten like a proper human being,
Yeah. This would be so captivating.
just all you need to find is a midget.
Get the guy who played, Sil.
Yeah.
What?
Ah. Okay. I often don't really like it when a writer doesn't know what to do with the plot, so they just blow it up.
But in this term, it does make a little bit of sense because, as the thing was saying, this weapon of power cannot be used by anyone because there's point in case if the
I'm
master.
not saying it doesn't make sense. It's a little bit lazy.
Yeah, it is. But I'm so into the story at this point that I'm not. It's not gonna ruin it for me. Just throw some paper mache rocks at them.
Oh, there we go.
You're insane.
Drop those guns.
No. Boo. Boo. Disappointing.
See? They had to blow it up.
That's good.
While everyone's distracted, I might nip off for some tea. Oh, of course. Escape.
He just did the Omega thing.
Yeah.
So the spaceship he arrived on was actually his TARDIS.
His TARDIS was in disguise.
TARDIS!
Oh.
Utopia!
My dear chap, it's
Utopia.
George Lucas and Russell T Davies are just ripping off from Malcolm Holt.
But to be fair, Utopia is brilliant.
As Moffat says, it's research, not plagiarism.
Depends on how you use it, I suppose.
Exactly.
Doctor, come back at once.
Wow.
That's brilliant.
It's been 1 second for him.
Like scolded school children.
That was a shift. What are you two talking about?
Don't try and explain, Joe. You'd never understand.
Brilliant.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely ending.
Yeah. Love it.
Right.
Cool.
We'll have to get into our review now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right. Colony in space. Your initial thoughts?
Really liked it. Like everything the only real sort of negatives I have of it are things that have just come from either it not having the budget or it just being a bit dated in terms of the Primitives costumes and stuff. But in terms of the story, every element that I found kind of uninteresting eventually became interesting, or something interesting happened from it. Like again, the primitive stuff. Like I was like, whatever, I don't really care. But all that setup made it so much more interesting when the Master showed up back in the final episode and that kind of thing. And the Master didn't show up too early, it didn't show up too late. He just showed up right when he was needed to make the story interesting, and it flowed really well. And even though there were a lot of side characters, I got all, even though I can't remember their names per se, I got where they were all coming from and what they were all doing, and I found all that really interesting. I never got bored with it.
This was one of those episodes that had the one big thing that I really liked about this was the geography.
Yes.
Yeah. In contrast to New Earth, this you really felt like there was this. You sort of knew. You got to know the setting and where everything was, and that was really good. I guess there were some moments that was slightly off executed, but overall, I was expecting something quite different from this story. I was expecting a lot of padding, and it wasn't. There wasn't much padding. It was just a slow burn. It was just a slow burn, yeah. And I liked the sort of exploration aspect of it. I liked how it sort of they went through a whole bunch of events and found out things, and there was no hurry.
No,
It was-
things just slowly unfolded.
Yeah, it was a real nice adventure, you know.
And it had dark elements, but it also had lighter and more humorous elements, but none of them clashed. There wasn't like a tonal dissonance or anything. They were all very well integrated into one another. I found it thoroughly enjoyable. It was paced really well. The tone was consistent. It was good. It was just really well structured. It wasn't a mind-blowing story, but there were multiple times where I was sort of like reacting to the episode the way it wanted, like the colonist spaceship blowing up and that kind of thing. And it was, yeah, I really, really liked it.
I think it's a credit to how great of writer Malcolm Hulke is, because this is regarded as his worst episode, and it's really good. It's really good. So, obviously, we'll start with the Doctor. How was the Doctor in this story?
Brilliant. It's Jon Pertwee. He's always brilliant. The Third Doctor is always brilliant. He fit the role he needed to in the story really well. His sort of starting off as an inquisitive, sort of just wondering what's going on, and then facing up to the corporation, and then eventually facing off with the Master, but having a different dynamic with the Master, and then that final episode that just, I could listen to them bicker about morality for hours and hours and hours. Like that, even with the weird testicle baby, that three-way conversation they had about the Doomsday device, and how the Doctor nearly contemplated ruling the galaxy with the Master, all that stuff felt really engaging and interesting. Pertwee's charisma just bounced off the screen, and they used him really well in the story.
Yeah, one of the best ways to utilize the Doctor in a story is to make it feel like you can follow him along the whole thing, and I really felt like through all 6 parts I could follow the Doctor all the way through it. And yeah, as you said, Pertwee is one of the most consistent Doctors. He's great in every episode. You know, just like Christopher Eccleston, I would say those two they're Doctors that just don't have a bad day. And yeah, Jon Pertwee was fantastic from start to finish. Even though was it the episode 1 cliffhanger where he's like, both of them, yeah, because there's 2 of the same. But yeah, no, it was classic Pertwee. Nothing wrong. He was great. And his interactions with the Master were brilliant, always brilliant. And of course, this episode has that classic, famous line of what was it? He said, "I want to see the universe, not rule it," or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely no problems with the Doctor. He was brilliant. Carried the story, pretty much. How was Joe Grant?
My issues with Joe Grant stem not just from this episode, but as her character as a whole. She was very much falls into that damsel in distress. Yeah, and she's mainly there just to ask questions so the audience can get exposition from smarter characters. And that's just, I think, a dated element of the 70s television world in terms of her character and the other female character as well. It was just a very sort of... But she was in, like, God, what's the actress's name? Katie Manning. She was very, very charismatic, as she always is. She was very entertaining. She didn't annoy me in any way. It's just... I felt like she could have done more in the story, but that's not just indicative of this story. Even the John Pertwee episodes I adore with her, and she still has a very sort of similar role to play, where she's just asking questions and on the sidelines a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's because it's one of those things where her character is kind of thick as a brick. That's the idea, but each writer sort of interprets it differently. Because, like, for example, like, if you look at something like The Mind of Evil, like, yeah, she's still not that knowledgeable, but she's got this real sort of independence to her. I found in The Mind of Evil she was really good at sort of this human questioning character for the Doctor, and she was more sort of there to like be his, be someone, is human conscious, but also like someone to lean on, I guess you could say. And then there's other stories where she's just screams, and I think in this one she was sort of halfway between her worst and her best. She was fine. Didn't play that much of a role. Asked some good questions, because obviously this episode has a lot of the complex political dialogue, so having her there to ask questions is good. But, yeah, she was just sort of... It was a relatively middle-of-the-road performance for her, and she did well. Should we go into side characters first, or should we go into the Master now? Side characters first, okay. Okay, I'm not sure who to touch on first, because there was a lot.
So I'm going to split this up in terms of the two lead colonists, the dude with the moustache and the other dude. They had their own sort of... They were... I can't remember their names, unfortunately, but they were... Because that's one thing that I could say was a flaw with this episode. There was so many side characters, but because it was 6 episodes, it didn't feel overcrowded. If this was just 4 episodes, it would have felt, like, overwhelming how many people are in it. But because there were 6 episodes, they all got moments to develop their characters. And even the guys in the corporation, because some of them were just faceless, middle-aged white men goons that couldn't really be differentiated... There was the guy with the moustache, there was the leader, the Roose Bolton guy, and then there was the other guy who at the end became the commander because he's like, this is immoral, we have to answer to the Earth's laws. They all had their own, even though they all came under a similar sort of bracket, they all had defining moments and they all got something to do. And then there was the firefights and stuff, and then there was the interesting character of like the previous colonist who saw images, the Macho Man guy, and then who got shot because he was actually working with the company. He's like, it's a trap.
I was watching the Ice Warriors a few weeks ago, and he reminds me of a character from the Ice Warriors that was with Jamie. I can't quite remember because it was a few weeks ago since I've seen it, but it was like I think it was like one of those characters that had maybe seen an Ice Warrior or seen where they were, and for some reason he reminded me of them. Just I witnessed this character. Actually, here's another example. The Poacher from Spearhead from Space. Yeah. I watched that last night. He played that role, basically. And what I would say about the other side characters, it kind of reminded me of Genesis of the Daleks, how there was all these different sort of factions. Nowhere near as compelling, because obviously Genesis is one of the best, but it kind of had that same sort of faction thing going on, which really suits a 6-parter. I think factions are good for a 6-parter. The political stuff was interesting, but I wouldn't say it was really my cup of tea. But I didn't not enjoy it. It was still interesting.
Yeah. I'm sort of in a slightly different boat where if it's well written, I absolutely adore like financial and political talk and how that's going to affect this thing and how if it's well written, I can find that stuff super compelling. In fact, it's part of the reason why, because Torchwood Children of Earth is very like much like based around politicians and how they're reacting to this thing, and I adore that kind of like when it's done well. I really like that, and it wasn't, as I said, it's not like spectacularly done in this, but it's done interestingly enough that I wasn't bored by it, I wasn't annoyed by it, I wasn't confused that much by it. I liked it.
Well, I mean, The Sunmakers has a political backdrop. Well, not backdrop, it's actually the story is about the taxation. And I think it's on Pluto. But then again, that story is written by Robert Holmes, and he's just, like, there's no one like Robert Holmes. You know, even though this was pretty good, like, you can't match Robert Holmes. He's just got this way about writing anything, and makes it captivating. But
one of the stories is on our list, I believe.
3 are on this list. Indeed. And one of the commenters said that they think The Space Pirates is the worst classic story. And that's written by Robert Holmes. So, yeah, interesting how he wrote The Space Pirates and then shortly after it spearhead from space.
And speaking of comments, I agree. I can't remember who commented this, unfortunately, but whoever it was that said this didn't deserve to be on the list, I agree. Because it was not even close to bad, I don't think. I found it wasn't even average. It was good. It was a good story that I really enjoyed.
There was classic stories that I expected to be good that were worse than this. Or at least I didn't enjoy them as much as I enjoyed this. So I put the low ranking down to the fact that it's quite mature. And long. Yeah, it's long. Other side characters, I guess we could touch on the sort of savages and the testicles.
To begin with, they were the most uninteresting part for me because they didn't really have an element to play into the story until the last 2 parts, where it was revealed that they had the Doomsday Weapon, and that was the whole that was the Master's plan. And that stuff was when that came around, that became really interesting. But before that, they were just kind of a threat, sort of an out there threat that we learned a little bits and pieces of here and there. But also part of the issue with them is unfortunately just the special effects not really being up to snuff, and you can attribute that to budget and also just it being made in the 70s and whatnot. And you can forgive that sort of thing. It's just unfortunately up until the last 2 episodes they didn't really have much of an interesting presence, other than providing a mystery. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were visually interesting. The design was interesting. It was just the execution of said design was not that great. But that's what, yeah. Yeah, but you can't really criticize that. That's just
Barry Lett's Doctor Who.
Yeah, there's just nothing you can do about that. So I didn't mind that. It was just, yeah, they were uninteresting to begin with, but then they grew to have a really interesting subplot. In fact, my favorite part of this whole story was when the Doctor, the Master, and the Testicle Baby were all having their 3-way discussion about morality and what you do with the super weapon. Yeah, it was just such a shame about the poor design, because that's one where I think it was a poor design choice as well. Yeah, like someone who was a full scale, because then you could have someone who looked like a Sensorite, where it just looked like a onesie with a cheap mask, but it would still be more captivating because then you could actually get a performance, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have the warbled voice and everything, and would have made the scene much more engaging. And in fact, yeah,
like a squishy toy.
It did, yeah, and when its little arms raised and stuff when it made point, it made the scene, which was brilliantly written, I think, just feel a little bit comical, which is such a shame. It undercut the tension a little bit. But other than that, that's probably my main flaw with this episode, was the design of that.
I did like the concept of them being mutes, though. The fact that they communicated through action was interesting, and it was a nice conflict for the Master, because the Master it manipulates through discussion, and because he couldn't talk to these things, he couldn't manipulate them, so he was forced to take action to get out of it, you know?
Which is a nice thing, because it's a sort of a nice change of pace for the Master as well, gives him something new to do, even though the episode did in and of itself reference that, oh, we've done this a few times before, oh well, the old ways work, and him kidnapping Joe and stuff. But no, yeah, I suppose we should move on to the Master then.
Yeah, why not? Absolutely brilliant. I heard a review of Colony in Space, saying that. I'm not going to name who did it, but I think you know who it is. He said that he was enjoying this story until the Master turned up. Of course, this person isn't exactly the biggest fan of the Roger Delgado Master, so I guess that's a big difference. Big difference. But for me personally, I actually think he was the best part of the story. I think he added this extra sort of, like, the thing about season 8 is that the fact that you've got this regular character as the Doctor's opposite makes it almost like it's like a two-man show as opposed to a one-man show. And I even though you could argue that he gets really overexposed as a villain, it makes the stories interesting because it almost feels like he's got his own sort of story arc, you know?
He's not, because he is definitely lessened as a villain because he appears so much. But as a character, he becomes more interesting because you start to get more of the why they're so diametrically opposed, the Doctor and the Master, how they're two sides of the same coin, and that dynamic is so interesting. And as I said, I could Roger Delgado as the Master and John Pertwee as the Doctor, see them have a debate about ethics for hours and hours and hours, and I'd be entertained because their chemistry, they bounce off each other, and the fact that there is this mutual respect for one another's intelligence and stuff, and it's just like it makes him more intriguing, even though he's not a huge threat. Like the fact that his goal wasn't I want to obliterate everything and have a show of power. He just wanted to hold the universe to ransom so that he could. He's got this philosophy of conquer or be conquered, where the Doctor has this philosophy of let's see everything. It's just, and it just makes for such compelling viewing. And yeah, I agree, he was the best part.
To draw a comparison to Game of Thrones, as I like to do, the Third Doctor and the Roger Delgado Master, it reminds me of Varys and Littlefinger. Yes. How, obviously the difference being with Varys and Littlefinger, it's like they are the eyes and ears of Westeros and they are on opposing sides, but they have this sort of mutual respect for each other. And what I like about both examples is that because they are on the same page, they sort of have this sort of sense of humor about them, and it's really funny.
Yeah, like when the Master's, the Doctor says, I suppose we shall have to go and walk then, and just pats the Master on the shoulder. That's very, like, them being jovial and chummy, even though the Doctor is the Master's hostage.
And I like how they make the Doctor and the Master seem like they're the same. It's really cool. What was I going to say? But yeah, definitely, like, when I was watching it, I was reminded of some of those scenes with Varys and Littlefinger, especially in season 1. Littlefinger playing obviously the Master, yes. The manipulative one, and then obviously the Doctor's like Varys, the more sort of for the greater good one. And it's such a great idea for characters to have a sort of yin and yang, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, every time I watch the Roger Delgado Master, my opinion of him gets better. Because he's just such an interesting idea of a character. The fact that he's a villain, but he's not your stereotypical villain. Like he's not black and white. You know, he's got his own motives. He's got his own character. It's really cool. I don't really know what else to say about the Master. He's just brilliant.
The Master is of all the brilliant things to come out and lore expanding things to come out of the John Pertwee era. The Master is the best one. Like, as you know, because he's stuck with the show for so long as a character, but like, this Delgado Master is the best. Yes, is the best Master, I'd say.
The difficult part with that is that no other Master is like him, because obviously from Deadly Assassin onwards, the Master's character changes. And if I were to compare it to the Doctor, you can kind of say, like, the first Doctor is kind of his own character, and then everything from Troughton onwards is kind of a different Doctor, you know what I mean? It's the same thing with the Master. Like, the Master here is very gentlemanly and reserved, and then from Deadly Assassin onwards, he's a bit more crazy and loses himself. So it's difficult to compare side by side the Masters, but there's definitely a strong argument for Roger Delgado, I think, just for his how iconic he is and how great he is at playing that version of the Master.
And his chemistry with John Pertwee.
Absolutely. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about the Master really. I thought he was just fantastic and elevated the story for me. This is going to take a while to get through because it's a 6-parter, but how was the plot?
Well structured, surprisingly well structured. I think there was because it was a slow burn and there was a lot of dialogue and a lot of things going on, but it was done in such a way where it was split up into sort of 3 camps, and it made it interesting. So it would cut in between the 3 of them and everyone's individual goals. And like in the first episode, it was just the colonists, and then in the second episode, the company was introduced. Yeah. It used the fact that it was a 6-parter to its advantage and slowly peeled back the layers, and so that it could drip feed information, so that it didn't front load you with a whole bunch of stuff, and you're like, what?
And the Leisure Hive, they did that exact mistake, is that trying to set everything up in part 1, and it just got so confusing. Whereas the way you're supposed to do it is set up things one at a time. You know, spend time on one thing in part 1, and then that's all set up.
It's what makes a universe feel alive.
To compare, because I watched Spearhead from Space again last night, to compare to that, the entire of part 1 is introducing the new Doctor. They don't even mention the Autons once. As soon as part 2 starts, you're in the factory with the plastic babies and stuff. It's such that's how you do these big stories, is one at a time. You know, give people time to actually understand what one thing is, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, each episode had a specific goal that it was heading toward, and it as I said, unfolded in a natural and interesting way. Yeah, and I really liked it. And the fact that all the way up till episode 6 there was a mystery, but it didn't feel like it was just teasing you because other things were being resolved whilst this other thing was continuing on. It didn't feel like it was just, oh, here's this mystery, how are they going to get out of this, what are they going to do? The colonists' story went straight in a straight line. And we learned about them at the beginning that they're struggling to survive and they don't know what to do, and there's threats out there. Then suddenly we realize there's the company who want to get rid of these colonists so they can harvest the planet for their own financial gain. And then there's then we learn about a little bit more about the fact that these brutes used to be an ancient and very advanced civilization. And then the Master shows up, and then we don't know what his intention is. And then the firefight starts, and like as the Master shows up, there's another element of mystery there. And that's as soon as the action starts happening when the Master shows up, whilst there's another story going on underneath that. And then everything has a logical and interesting conclusion. The only thing I didn't really like is they didn't stick with their guns of wiping out all the colonists, because I feel like that would have elevated the story just a little bit more because that's something I don't like, is when the story does something big and ballsy and dramatic and then goes back on it. I'm looking at you, Hellbent. It just
That's not just one episode though, that's an entire 3 seasons of story, and then they're like, let's just forget it.
So, discussion for another time. But what I liked, so that was sort of, in terms of the story, one of my biggest issues is the moment that got the biggest reaction out of me, a positive reaction out of me, was the ship blew up. And I was just like, that's great. The colonists are dead. The people we started with, the heroes of the story in a way. Because the Doctor and Jo just enter the story. They're not really the heroes of the story. They're just a part of it. They're just players in the broader scheme of the game, but we're supposed to align ourselves with the colonists. The fact that they just died, I thought was brilliant, and then they went back on that, unfortunately, but it ended to a happy ending. And then the fact that in episode 1, the Brigadier says, "Doctor, you come back here right this instant," and then 6 episodes later, after a big firefight on a planet, the wiping out, the genocide of an ancient species and the Master.
You know what it reminds me of? Series 10 with Nardole. Yes. That exact thing happened. He went off to make tea and then he came back. Yes. So funny. Yeah. I think it was for Smile and Thin Ice.
Yeah. They have 2 episodes and then they come back, and Nardole. I really like that. That was because that was a fun callback, because as soon as the Brigadier showed back up again, I was like, oh yes, of course, the Brigadier. And then I was just like, oh, but what are they going to do with the Brigadier? And then they made a really funny joke out of it. So yeah. So I think everything was paced really well. I had a few issues here and there with the story, but overall, I really liked it. Really, really liked it.
Yeah, it was a really great plot. Yeah, just it's difficult to say a lot about it because it was sort of it doesn't have like a lot of talking points, but it as a whole it came and it went and it was nice, you know. And I think the thing that surprised me the most was the fact that 6 parts went by and I enjoyed all of them.
There was only one sort of point where I started feeling fatigue a little bit was when we first saw the space baby, but then immediately that disappeared for like an episode and a half, and then the Master showed up, and as soon as the thing I was the least interested in appeared, other things more interestingly appeared also, and then the firefight started happening, so things started developing more. So yeah, everything was paced really well and it was a nice balance to everything, and then even the things I didn't like ended up ending at a place where I did. So yeah.
And I liked how the worst parts of this story were kept to a minimum, and the best parts were kept to a maximum. Yeah. So that was brilliant. So anything else we want to discuss about the plot?
I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, it was just very solid. Very solid, as expected by Malcolm Hulke. Who, you know, if you're doubting pacing, you know, just look up all of his stories. Some of his stories are paced brilliantly. Right, so I guess we'll have to get on to the reception. So out of 241 stories on DWM, of course, this is up to 2013. Not counting the Capaldi era. I'm actually really interested to see where some of those stories end up. Jesus Christ. Worried even. So out of 241 stories, it's ranked 199. It's below The Savages, which is actually quite a similar story to this one, but I would argue this one's better. It's below The Celestial Toymaker. It's below The Invisible Enemy, which I disagree with. The Nucleus is far worse than The Testicle Baby. I mean, to be fair, The Invisible Enemy, it does have some interesting visuals, though, when they go inside the...
But the same thing could be said about the Leisure Hive.
Moving on. It's below The Idiot's Lantern.
That's a very different, because they're so different.
So different.
But, like, I do think this is...
I think this is better than The Idiot's Lantern.
It does have a distinct advantage of being 6 episodes.
Yeah. It's below The Smugglers, which is, in my opinion, the worst Hartnell story. The Smugglers is like watching paint dry, so I completely disagree with that. Oh dear, this is going to upset both of us. It's below Victory of the Daleks.
Those Power Ranger Daleks are far... I do, but I ate them. The M&M Daleks. They...
Is that scene where Matt Smith's holding up
Uh,
a Shrewsbury biscuit?
And any and all threat that had been built up in the last five seasons of the show. No, four. Yeah. And all threat that the Daleks had just disappeared because the Doctor, like, there was that one moment where the Doctor took them seriously, and then that stopped, and then the Paradigm Daleks are way worse than the Testicle Baby in this. Like, the fact that, because that's not even an interesting episode. The one interesting gimmick of that episode is, the Daleks are serving tea and they're working with Winston Churchill. Yeah. Yeah, like, that's an interesting concept, but they don't do anything with it. Whereas in this, you had so much more interesting going on, and every side character was fascinating, yeah.
I guess what it comes down to is just, well, not just that, but what I've noticed is I think most people, like, who aren't big into, like, the deep stories, they tend to vote for whatever was the most watchable. And Victory of the Daleks has some nice presentation. You know, it's like most, like pretty much almost all Matt, like 90% of Matt Smith episodes have that about it. Really well presented, funny. You know, they move fast, but ultimately they just don't do as much as what this did.
Or they attempt to do as much, and then it falls on its face. It's we'll get to that when we get to that on the main series, but yeah.
Personally, Victory of the Daleks for me, like the last half of that story is just terrible.
Because the first half is an interesting setup.
Yeah.
But they don't do anything with
Yeah, I don't know why they gave the Daleks to Mark Gatiss. That was a mistake.
It's strange to me because they should give him but they tried to give Mark Gatiss an interesting horror story with the Crimson Horror because he writes a show called The League of Gentlemen, which is so fucked up and so funny and so interesting.
Transvestite taxi driver.
Yeah, and Papa Lazaru, you're my wife now. It's just, it's awful. But Mark Gatiss could write some really interesting stuff. But I'm just surprised that none of his Doctor Who stories really ever did anything for me.
Speaking of Mark Gatiss, the story's rated below Night Terrors, which is garbage.
Night Terrors. When we were talking about worst episodes of New Who, he brought up Night Terrors. I forgot I'd even seen it.
Night Terrors is in my bottom 10 for New Who, so I hope that triggers some of you.
Not that we want to antagonize our audience.
Night Terrors is worse than Fear Her for me.
I would agree with that. Night Terrors is really bad. Fear Her is really bad, but at least it's entertaining, Lisa. Yeah.
At least you get to see the Doctor stroking a cat, and then like he looks at inside of the box, and he's like, "Ooh, this is an energy."
And the Scribble Monster is hilarious. So, Night Terrors is worse than Fear Her.
Yeah.
And way worse than this. This was so much better than Fear Her. And Night Terrors.
Oh yeah, this is a different league altogether. Oh fucking hell! This is below the Flash two-parter.
I'll let you have that one.
Okay. So, what I want to know is why did Stephen Moffat hire the guy who wrote Fear Her to do a two-parter?
Maybe Moffat wanted to sabotage the show.
How many scenes are there in a two-parter?
How many scenes?
Yeah, approximately.
Well, I'd imagine 40 maybe between the two.
About 40 scenes?
Yeah, approximately.
Well, when I was last watching the Flash two-parter recently, I counted how many scenes I didn't care for. It was about 20. There's about 20 filler scenes in the Flash two-parter, right? 20 scenes that didn't need to be there. Do you know what that means? I think it means that it was supposed to be one part. They just dragged it out as far as they can. On top of that, it's not a good story. It's boring as fuck. It tries to be scary, but it's not. It's just like, when you go to, when you're like 12 and you go to like a kids animation course and you're taught to use Blender.
Yep.
That's what the Flash two-parter is. It's like just they're playing around with Blender. And then at the very end, it just all blows up and it was all pointless. So,
The only thing that came out of that was the gross image of Amy disappearing. And she's like, "You've been a ganger this whole time." And then it led into A Good Man Goes to War, which we'll get to. Oh, we will.
yes, dark days down the road that we won't discuss now. But yeah, this was 1,000 times better than that fuckery, the Flash two-parter. God, Jesus, Series 6, what an abomination. This is ranked below New Earth.
Fuck that.
And it's ranked below The Leisure Hive.
Okay, so this one's a bit more interesting because it's a multiple part classic story rather. Yeah.
Side by side with New Who.
Yeah, because there's different worlds basically, but in terms of quality we can still compare. But in this case, this is a similarly complicated plot, but it was just one that was done with grace and intelligence and charm and pace and wit, and had the Master in it, and had villain intentions that made sense.
John Pertwee on full
Yeah. In everything, there were motivations that made sense, and fuck the Leisure Hive. This is leagues better than the Leisure Hive. Because the Leisure Hive itself is boring, even with all the interesting weird crap. And this isn't boring, because it's done with maturity and intelligence.
Well, I guess maybe some people think that this is boring because it's done with maturity and intelligence.
Those people are immature and dumb. I'm kidding, but everyone's entitled to their opinion, but like, this is so much better than the Leisure Hive. Like, leagues and leagues better.
If you're one of those people that thought that Series 6 was one of the best seasons of New Who, don't associate with me, because I will castrate you. I will online castrate you.
Not that he wants to antagonize the...
I'm not going to physically castrate you. That's disgusting. But you know, I've got my problems with the Matt Smith era. Let's just say that. Okay, let's have a look at the stories that it ranked above. The Lazarus Experiment. Fair. A Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. Fair. The Gunfighters. Very different stories.
Yeah, it's hard because the Gunfighters is a bit more of a fun... It's more of a fun sort of just... I don't want to use the word pulpy because that's kind of doing it a disservice, but I can't quite think of the right word. But it's more of a fun story, whereas this is more serious, and the implication that like the colonists died and stuff. The tone is just so different. But I do think I would personally prefer this to that.
Right. See, I would have the opposite. I would definitely prefer the Gunfighters, but I will give it a pass because they're so different.
Yeah, it's like that's one where it comes down to personal preference.
Yeah.
Because they do very different.
But then when I look at that list and I see that the Gunfighters is below the Smugglers, that's when I get angry. Because I'm like, the Smugglers is my least favourite Hartnell story, and the Gunfighters is one of my favourite Hartnell stories. It's fun. It's great fun. So what other stories is it above? Nightmare in Silver, yep. The Long Game, yeah. I mean, I like The Long Game, but it's not better than this. Some of the ones that are on the list, it's above, so they'll be interesting when we get to them. Daleks in Manhattan.
Daleks in Manhattan is better than this, but I will justify myself when we get to that in the main series, because I have a lot to say about that two-parter.
Yeah, I think we'll save our opinions on that for... Yeah.
One of the most underappreciated stories.
Yeah, because I'm looking at Daleks in Manhattan and it's ranked like alongside some of the ones on the list. That upsets me. This one hurts me a bit. It's ranked above Planet of Giants, another Hartnell story that I really like.
Same. I really like that story as well.
Planet of Giants isn't like an intelligent story, but I really like its ambition.
It's a very sort of just, again, a fun story, like an interesting concept, and they're like, hey, we can do anything with this show, let's do this, and it's fun, yeah. In fact, that's one of the ones, because my earliest memory, not just of TV, but like in life, is the cliffhanger to the first episode of The Sensorites. One of my other earliest memories is that story. I can't remember what scene or anything, but I just remember them walking along.
That story, actually, Planet of Giants, has really good cliffhangers. The first one being, I think it's the first one's either, because I know there's two of them. There's one where they're being chased by a cat, and the cat's big.
I do remember that.
And then the other one is actually like one of my favorite cliffhangers I've ever seen, and that's when they're stuck in the sink and the guy like unplugs it and the water goes through. Like that is actually like a danger. Like they could have died. That was really cool. Rip. Ooh, yeah. Okay. The thing is, it's ranked above stories that I personally really enjoy, like The Web Planet and Love and Monsters. But I can see why people would say those two are worse than this.
Those are worse than this.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. Okay, I'll let go Love and Monsters because Love and Monsters is Love and Monsters is that special needs kid that, like, you know, that you know, that one kid in the class that you just, that's only some people like, but others can't stand them because they are xenophobic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that episode. This is another one we disagree on. Yeah.
It's a difficult one because,
But yeah,
yes, I can see why people hate it, but I personally
I'm.
really like it.
Yeah, we'll save our opinions for that one for the video because that's going to be a really interesting one, I think.
Love and Monsters is a tough one. The Web Planet, yes, it's better, but I think I still prefer I personally prefer the Web Planet because of its similar to Planet of Giants, its ambition. Yeah. I love the Zabi and the whatever the other ones are called. Like just the magic of the Hartnell era for me is like one of my favorite things.
Because it's bursting with imagination.
But yeah, this is a better story, objectively. But yeah, it should be ranked higher than some of those other ones. Jesus Christ, Victory of the Daleks, Night Terrors, the Flash two-parter. Blasphemy. Paul Cornell, Martin Day, and Keith Topping gave the serial a mixed review in the Discontinuity Guide in 1995. Writing, well-meaning and much more interesting before the Master arrives, at which point it turns from a Hulk political parable into a typical runaround, rather like watching socially aware paint dry. Oh, okay.
See, that's an interesting because I'm coming from the perspective where I haven't watched this in broadcast order, so I understand the Master fatigue. Like that criticism makes complete sense to me. If you were at that time and watching this chronologically, you'd probably be like, oh, it's the Master again. As much as I love him, I do somewhat get that. However, them saying that the political intrigue stops when the Master goes up is just wrong, because the colonist storyline keeps going. It becomes more action-oriented, but that's because we're 5 episodes in.
The Master makes it like it puts another twist on it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I do understand their criticism, but coming from our perspective of it, I didn't mind his inclusion. In fact, as we said, he's our collective favourite thing about it. Yeah, so I didn't mind that. And also, I don't think it took away from the other story. In fact, him being the abdicator, whatever it was, him being the judge, made for an interesting sort of wrinkle in the plot and everything. And then the whole... Yeah, I liked it.
In the Television Companion 1998, David J. Howe and Stephen James Walker reprinted some positive reviews from fanzines. Whatever that... Fanzine. Oh, yeah. But commented that although the story is indeed refreshing in its setting and contains some interesting ideas, and of course it's refreshing because this is the first TARDIS travel story since the War Games. Yeah. So, there you go. Indeed refreshing in its setting and contains some interesting ideas and well-drawn characters, it is distinctly short on visual interest and dramatic incident, and consequentially comes across as being rather dull and lifeless. They felt that the Uxarius civilization was flawed, and the most exciting moment was the reveal of the Master, though that had already been telegraphed at the beginning of the first episode.
That's an interesting one, because I could kind of see how people would think it's kind of lifeless, because it's quite a desolate and muddy and murky and grimy planet. But I feel like that grit of the actual aesthetic helped elevate the story and make it feel a bit more grounded, even though it was a space travel story. It made the political stuff feel a bit more real, even though they were wearing those ridiculous Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon outfits. I didn't get distracted by that because the aesthetic of the rest of the episode, the world they were living in, felt lived in. Yeah. Exactly. So I didn't mind the aesthetic at all.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. Maybe that maybe they could have used a different garage from the one, because I was like, that's the garage from Inferno. But whatever. In 2009, Radio Times reviewer Patrick Mulkern described the story as richly detailed, fast-moving drama that rolls out eventfully over a 6-week period, which made it indigestible to watch all at once. He praised the structure which allowed it to not tire in the middle, as well as the supporting cast and the conversation between the Doctor and the Master in the last episode. Yes, I agree with you, sir. I agree with you. David Golder of SFX, reviewing the DVD release, gave the story 3 out of 5 stars. He noted that it had ambition but was slow and visually uninspired. Slow, yes. Visually uninspired. No, I would say visually flawed,
Yeah.
but not necessarily uninspired.
There's a bit of flair to it.
Yeah. DVD Talks John Sinnott rated Colony in Space 3 out of 5 stars, describing it as a decent adventure with the minuses that outweighed the pluses. He noted that the 6-week episode structure allowed for padding and repeated scenes. Yeah, we noticed that at the beginning, like the second cliffhanger was the same as the first one. But it had a lot of interesting aspects, such as the Time Lord sending the Doctor, the way the story was constructed, and Pertwee and Delgado's chemistry. Yes. In 2010, Charlie Jane Anders of IO9 named the cliffhanger to the 4th episode, in which the Master decides to shoot the Doctor as one of the greatest cliffhangers in Doctor Who. It was good. It was the best. It was the best one, wasn't it?
Disagree. The button.
And to be fair, I did really enjoy the first one with the But that us leading off that episode 4 one, that was pretty good.
Yeah, the fact that a stray bullet will come and hit you, that was...
Yeah. Yeah, this had some good cliffhangers, actually. Which is part of, like, having good cliffhangers, actually, even though that it seems retarded to hear, having good cliffhangers actually improves the pace, especially if you're watching them in a line.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why the War Games works as a 10-part story is because every cliffhanger is amazing.
Yeah. Like, think of New Who. Imagine you're watching the final 3 episodes of series 4. You get to turn left at the end of Turn Left, and then imagine if at the end of this big epic alternate universe story where Rose has shown up and all the shit's going down. Imagine at the end of that they just went away and they just floated away. You'll be like, well, that was exhausting. The episode would still be one of the best ones Russell T Davies ever wrote. But now think of it with Bad Wolf showing up everywhere, and the music that plays. And remember how hyped you were when that happened. It means the end of the universe, and the cloister bell is ringing, and it's just like, and all the snap zooms onto Bad Wolf.
That was the most hyped I'd ever been for Doctor Who in my life. Those 2 weeks between like Turn Left, Stolen Earth, Journey's End, I was at like every single day. I couldn't stop thinking about Doctor Who. I was like, this is going to be the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
And yes, yeah, cliffhangers are important, I reckon, for carryover stories. Yeah.
I'm going to be real sensitive with this because if for some reason someone accidentally watches this, like Jake, for example, that Stolen Earth cliffhanger, one of the best, if not the best. It's so good. So genius.
Yeah. I can't wait to get to that. Yeah.
Right, so our good old mate IMDb. Part 1, 7.1. Part 2, 7.2. Part 3, 7. Part 4, 7.1. Part 5, 7. Part 6, 7.1.
I would say they're pretty much all on the same level. I don't think there's any real dip in quality or increase in quality. It's just, it's all consistent, I think.
But based on what I'm seeing, I guess that overall they give the story a 7.1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, IMDb scores are difficult because there's such a wide spread.
And because anyone can rate something. So, like, someone could jokingly rate something positive and someone could jokingly rate something negative, and
I mean, Hellbent has an 8.9, so...
clearly there must be jokers on there.
Yep. And what is it? Last of the Time Lords has 8.3. Yep.
Someone has asked us to defend Last of the Time Lords, I think. We're not doing that one today. We're doing something else, which we'll reveal to you. But
More controversial. You'll have to wait and find out for that one. Right, now, I've been waiting to discuss this because I've suddenly just realised recently that one of my favourite Doctor Who writers is Malcolm Hulke. He co-wrote The Faceless Ones with David Ellis. I've already talked before about how much I love The Faceless Ones and how underrated it is. Obviously, this for me, this being the big one, he co-wrote The War Games with Terrance Dicks. Like, that's my favourite classic story, so there you go.
It's one of my favorite classic stories.
It's a masterpiece.
Everyone should go watch it.
He wrote Doctor Who and the Silurians.
That's a good one. Yeah.
He co-wrote The Ambassadors of Death with David Whittaker, Terrance Dicks, and Trevor Ray, which is another great one. I mean, season 7 is just bulletproof. Of course, he wrote The Sea Devils, being the sequel, and he wrote Frontier in Space, and he wrote Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Oh my god.
Like, what a writer!
Yeah.
Like, that is amazing.
Consistent. Yes.
And I would say that this story, because we enjoyed it, like another good one. Like Malcolm Hulke, man, that's what a writer. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well done. And his writing in this story was the best part, I think. Like, I mean, obviously we loved the Masters, the acting performance, but what was wrong with this story was more the execution as opposed to the writing. I thought the writing of this story was stellar.
As I said, the writing of that three-way argument about the Doomsday device with the testicle baby and the Master and the Doctor, what was being said was fantastic and gripping and interesting and made for a great climax, while concurrently that whole colonist thing was going on outside. That was all real interesting. It was just a shame about the execution of the visuals of the testicle baby.
I've got this picture in my head of this story being done a season earlier with Derek Sherwin's production style, and it would have been so much better with Derek Sherwin, like his movie style, like direction, and just like he found a way to bend the budget so that it all looked realistic, beautiful, gorgeous. So it's such a shame that Derek Sherwin didn't stick around. I know. Like, as much as I like Barry Letts, Derek Sherwin is just flawless.
Just got it. He just had it.
Yeah. Like, oh my god. Like, fucking hell. Like, he's the in terms of like crew members, he's the Rob Sherman of Classic Who.
Yes.
Produced the War Games and Spearhead from Space, and had influence over the rest of season 7. Like,
Season 7, which is just unparalleled. It's so good.
yeah, I mean, on DWM season 7's the number 1 season, so, and there's a reason why. Well justified. Script editor Terrance Dicks has frequently stated that he disliked the original premise of the Doctor being trapped on Earth, and had meant to subvert this plan as soon as he felt he could get away with it. He recalls in a DVD documentary interview on the Inferno release having had it pointed out to him by Malcolm Hulke that the format limited the stories to merely 2 types, alien invasion and mad scientist.
I've seen that interview, yeah. And I agree with him. But what they did do was fucking extraordinary. So, like, a double-edged sword, really. And this, when because this was the first foray when he fixed the TARDIS and everything, yeah. They did a really, really good job. It is a little bit of a step down in quality, but it's still, like, I get... Yeah. Was it Terrance Dicks, sorry, you were saying that said this? Yeah. Terrance Dicks, like, I get what he was saying, and he wasn't wrong. It's just, when you compare this to what came before...
Yeah. I mean, you would have expected something bigger for the first trip out, like maybe something like Day of the Daleks, or The Three Doctors, or something like that,
Yeah, absolutely. The Three Doctors is great. I love the Three Doctors.
So, this story was directed by Michael E. Bryant. He also directed The Sea Devils, The Green Death, Death to the Daleks, Revenge of the Cybermen, and The Robots of Death.
No, The Green Death was Joe's final story, eh? Yeah, that one. That one stands out to me because I just have that visual of the Doctor walking out of the party, getting on his car in that farming night, looking back.
In news story I've ever seen.
And just the gorgeous, just no music, I don't think either, except for the sound coming from the.
Death Part 6 is a flawless episode.
It's beautiful, and that image of the Doctor just riding along the horizon in Bessie in this silent night. It's just beautiful direction.
It's on par with some of the best endings, like, you think of like the real emotional ends to episodes like Doomsday, like Face the Raven, just, the Green Death is so good.
The standard setter.
Yeah. I didn't really have a problem with his direction. I think it was more just the production values, I think, was the issue.
Yeah. He didn't there was no unlike the Leisure Hive. The Leisure Hive. One thing I'll give over this, it had creative cinematography and they tried to do ambitious things. No. Efficient. Yeah, it was a very efficiently directed episode or a series of episodes. Because it was 6 episodes, I can kind of understand just trying to work as much as you can with, because I imagine it would be a hellish schedule, because I imagine they wouldn't have that long to shoot everything. So yeah, it's not bad direction by any means, but it wasn't spectacular.
Yeah. Some of the action set pieces, I think, for example, when the rocket was lifting off, I don't know if they were limited, but it was kind of that clunky thing that you often see in the Pertwee era. Yeah. I recall the end of the Time Warrior, where it's supposed to explode, but it just goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they replaced it with a shitty CGI version that's even worse. And it's like this animated castle and this shitty fire goes. Oh god, it's tough when you have to choose between NAF practical effects and NAF CGI.
NAF practical, all the way NAF practical.
Because at least you can laugh at NAF practical, whereas NAF CGI is like,
there's a charm to NAF practical.
Yeah.
There's a charm to it.
So Michael E. Bryant, he also did work on Z-Cars, Blake 7, Secret Army, Kessler, Blood Money, Treasure Island, and the Emmy award-winning BBC adaptation of Charles Dickens' story A Tale of Two Cities, the feature film Tanglers, the series Hideaway, and many more productions including Howard's Way and EastEnders. EastEnders. Our favourite. Thanks, Michael Grade.
No, yeah, that's a good repertoire. No, yeah, it's good.
He also spent time directing television in the Netherlands. I wonder if he was there for Arc of Infinity. God, just that story about J&T telling bystanders we're shooting, and they're like, ah. Of course, the music was by Dudley Simpson. Dudley Simpson composed music from Doctor Who from Season 2 to Season 17, without a doubt the most iconic classic Who musician. The thing, obviously they replayed the Masters theme from The Mind of Evil, as they do, because it's awesome. Trying to think of... I think the music in this it didn't invade the story, but it was there.
Yeah, it was present. It was it wasn't... Other than the Masters thing, none of it was particularly memorable, but it didn't impact, just like the direction, it was very efficient, it wasn't negative or positive, it was just there and it did its job.
I think the one thing that maybe holds back Dudley Simpson in a way is that he's quite limited to what he can use, but what he ends up doing with what he's got, he makes some very nice, catchy...
Absolutely, there's some good themes and motifs in there.
So now we move on to the trivia for Colony in Space. The story had the working title The Colony. Director Michael Bryant voiced the commentary accompanying a propaganda film watched by the Doctor on the IMC spaceship in episode 2. That's right, he was watching, and then he closed the curtain and this part was originally intended for Pat Gorman, who was credited on the episodes 1 and 2 as Primitive and Voice. So obviously director Michael Bryant did it instead. It's interesting. Maybe it's got something to do with the whole equity card thing.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
The Radio Times program listing for episode 1 was accompanied by continuation of the comic strip adaptation in the form of 3 additional black and white illustrations not included in the strip itself. The first showed the Doctor looking over a rise, with Joe in the background asking, "What is it?" The second depicted the the colonist dome and spaceship, and the third was a shadow of a mysterious humanoid figure behind the Doctor and Joe. The accompanying caption read, "A new adventure for Doctor Who 6.10."
Huh. Maybe it might be 6:10 in the evening. Huh. Strange.
I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. But if by 6.10 you mean the Winds of Winter, I'm down. That's brilliant. Anyway, Michael Bryant had intended, this is the director, had intended that the role of Morgan be played by Susan Jameson. Don't know who that is. However, he was overruled by head of drama serials Ronnie Marsh, who believed that a woman in that role wouldn't be appropriate for the family audience.
That explains a lot. If that was
There was a lot of gender roles in this story.
because that was, as I mentioned during my recap, one of my biggest issues was the fact that the two female characters were just kind of took a sideline to everything else. Having heard that that's what, I mean, I'm not surprised in the 70s that the head of the BBC's, whoever it was, a person in power, that was his belief system. But yeah.
The thing is, though, because last night I watched Spearhead from Space, and that has gender roles as well, but Robert Holmes takes the piss out of it. Like, it's the poacher and his wife, and he's like, "Give me some grub, woman." But that's tongue-in-cheek, whereas this was played straight, you know?
Yeah, where like this is where it gets like a little bit more like because it's very much like the men do everything and the women just sit there and watch. It's very sort of it's very regressive. So it's kind of that's a
As it might impart an unintended sexuality to some scenes because she was already signed to a contract when Marsh got involved. She was still paid her full salary. Well, at least there's that.
well, good for her. But I mean, I imagine she would have preferred to.
Yeah, would have preferred to be in this.
Yeah, act. That's God, that sucks.
Yep. Right after the lights to the colony go out following Norton's attack on Jim Holden and a primitive, Mary Ash says to her father, "Don't worry, Jim will fix it." By coincidence, this line unintentionally name drops the title of the BBC show Jim Will Fix It, which did not premiere until 1975. However, it later featured Tom Baker and Peter Cushing, who played the Fourth Doctor and Doctor Who, respectively. And also devised the fourth wall-breaking short, A Fix with Sontarans. I believe that's a... I've heard of that somewhere. A Fix with Sontarans. Is it Sarah Jane?
I think so. It's a short that I think was produced by the people who made Jim Will Fix It, and it's like a parody / homage to Doctor Who. Yeah.
Pat Gorman was credited. We already know this. Roger Delgado was credited as Master on episode 4 and the Master on episodes 5 and 6.
Typo.
This is the first time that the TARDIS travels to another planet since the Doctor's exile began in the War Games. It is only able to do so because it is under Time Lord's control.
Huh. Right.
I guess so. I mean, I think isn't it? Because the story before this is the Claws of Axos, and that's where the galactic yo-yo line comes from. So I guess that story has to lead into it. And then obviously he gets free properly in the Three Doctors, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Uh,
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. Yes. I know what you mean.
From the Brigadier's perspective, the Doctor and Joe were only away from unit headquarters for seconds. Rose Tyler later admonished her mother that the TARDIS is a time machine I could go travelling around. Oh, this is from World War III, yeah. And 10 seconds would have passed, but obviously they don't come back in 10 seconds.
Nope.
Because, drama. The TARDIS was previously carried away during the Doctor's absence in his first incarnation in the Web Planet. Yes. So, actually, I want to discuss this because there's differing continuity on if you can lift the TARDIS or not. Because I've heard...
I have a theory. Maybe it's outer...
Isn't it in human nature that blood does not lift it or something like that?
because it's so dense, and it's also because it's shut down. But also, a theory that could possibly explain it is maybe its density changes depending on its environment. Because maybe on this particular planet, the outer shell of the TARDIS, because it's two different reality, like because it's a reality that's kept inside one external case, which maybe the density of the external case isn't affected by the size of the internal case, right? Because of the which box is bigger thing. So maybe the police box isn't that dense on this particular planet, so it just weighs enough that the colonists can carry it.
In Death in Heaven, the TARDIS is on the plane.
Sorry.
In the episode Death in Heaven from Series 8, if you can remember, the TARDIS is on a plane. How does the plane not go down?
Maybe the plane has a special density. Or maybe Death in Heaven's just not a well thought out episode.
The most finale.
It's not like Hellbent where it gets me fired up. I'm just so...
It's a snoozer, isn't it? Luckily, IMDb doesn't like it. Death in Heaven is, even though I disagree, is the lowest rated finale on IMDb. Just below Last of the Time Lords. Time Lords appear on their home world. They again are wearing black and white robes as they were in the Doctor's trial in the War Games. What?
In the first episode, before they took off.
That's right. I forgot about that. The Doctor and Joe gain entry to the Master's TARDIS using the key the Doctor had previously obtained in Terror of the Autons. That's pretty good continuity there.
Yeah, I did like that, yeah. I remember that.
And smart to do it from the first episode so that if you reorder the stories, it doesn't, Unlike season 25, when Ace picks up something in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy that she actually has for the previous two stories. No! This is the first time Joe Grant sees the interior of the TARDIS. Though having been the Doctor's companion for some time, she reveals that she never really believed that the Doctor could travel in time and space.
That was quite a funny bit, yeah.
The educators are expanded in a prose called Lucifer Rising and Original Sin. The Doctor himself posed as an Earth magistrate, the examiner on the planet Vulcan during his second incarnation during Power of the Daleks. Interesting. Didn't make that connection in my head. The Doctor mentions that the Brigadier mistook the Spanish ambassador for the Master. This is an in-joke. Roger Delgado played the Spanish ambassador Mendoza in the ITC entertainment series Sir Francis Drake in 1961.
That's quite neat. I like that.
This is the only serial of Season 8 in which Captain Yates and Sergeant Benton do not appear. Maybe that's why it's some people's least favourite of the season.
Because it might feel separate from the tone of the rest of the series.
Yeah. The story is one of the first to use the show for social commentary. In this instance, the dangers of colonialism. The story by former Communist Party of Great Britain member Malcolm Hulke. I didn't know that.
No. That explains a lot.
Has been described as unashamedly left-wing with the pioneering colonists and the greedy IMC.
Yeah. That could also be part of the reason why if someone was more of a conservative viewpoint, they might not enjoy it as much because it may feel like a bit of an attack on their beliefs per se. Yeah.
That being said, it doesn't bash you over the head like it does now.
It's not like incredible. It's not.
Kill the moon.
It's not. Yeah. It's not so much like down with capitalism, down with the conservatives, down with right wing, whatever. It's not so much that it sort of overbears the actual story itself. It's just something that's present. So I can see why that may turn some more conservative viewers off.
This episode takes place on Exarius in March 2472, so not too far in the future.
No.
The location shoot in Cornwall was made difficult by cold, driving rain and resulting mud. We saw that in the fight. Amongst other difficulties, the inclement weather caused the destruction of the garden planted outside the colonists' dome.
Oh no.
This was the first of 2 John Pertwee serials that Peter Forbes Robertson had roles in, the other being the Sea Devils. Okay. Alright, so time for the viewership. Episode 1, what did you think it got?
Oh, that's a good question. Because it was the first of the season, right?
4th of the season.
4th story of the season? Okay, well then, 6 million?
7.6 for episode 1. What do you think episode 2 got?
So that was 7.6 for the first one? 7.4?
8.5.
Oh, because there probably would have been a bit of an excitement about it being the first extraterrestrial episode.
Episode 3?
8?
9.5. So it went up. Episode 4?
8.5?
8.1. So it went down. Back down. Now just remember episode 4 was when the Master came in, right? Episode 5.
9.
8.8. So it went back up 0.7. And then episode 6.
9.
8.7. So it peaked at episode 3. So the first 3 episodes it went up, up, up. Yeah. So relatively really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. As compared to the Leisure Hive, which was started with 4, went down to 2.5.
Buck Rogers,
Yeah.
The show was
So funny they went from City of Death, which had 16 million, and then 1 year later, Leisure Hive, 3 million. Right. Conclusion and rating out of 10 for Colony in Space.
a very, very solid and interesting episode, paced really well. Does have its flaws here and there that prevents it from becoming really, really special and really, really great. But I've never found myself getting too bored. I never found myself getting really angry with it. Some things haven't aged well. Certain plot elements I didn't like the colonists surviving, but that could just be my bloodlust. Who knows? But yeah, it was good. A solid episode, solid set of episodes. Are we ranking the episodes individually or? Yeah, overall, a 7 out of 10. Good, not great. By no means deserve to be on this list.
You put it on par with, it is apples and oranges, but you put it on par with World War III from Series 1. You gave that a 7.
Yeah, it's a good episode that has an intention. It does it well. It's paced well. It's interesting. I never found myself getting bored with it. As you said, it's quite apples and oranges comparing the two because they're very different tones. But yeah, not even middle of the road. It's good, but it's just not something I'll probably come back to anytime soon.
So this was a very steady episode, I would say. There were a few negatives, but they were also brought up by positives, like the Master. Yes. Master made up for the fact that there was some bad design. I thought this was quite enjoyable. If this is the weakest of Season 8, then that's a bloody good season. Yeah. But I'll have to wait and see for that, because I've only seen 3 stories from that season. So I thought The Colony in Space was a nice, solid 6-parter. Didn't drag as much as I thought it would, and I really enjoyed it. And there's not much more I can say on it. I'm just going to give my rating, and my rating is 7.5 out of 10, which puts it below World War III with my ratings, because I quite enjoy that story, but not too far below. I think 7.5 is a nice, healthy, good Doctor Who rating, nice and solid.
To those who are looking for an interesting classic story.
Yeah, if you just want to watch something interesting, go watch Colony in Space. You know, you might not understand all of it, but it's fun.
Yeah. Well constructed.
I shouldn't even have to ask this question, but I do it every time. Is this worse than Hellbent?
Actually, yes. Oh, I hated it. It was terrible. No, absolutely not. No, not even close.
Not even close. Not even in. They're like 5 tiers apart at least.
Oh, at minimum, yeah. Leagues better. Yeah.
Of course, this leads us into our next section, which I've been waiting for.